And so the ironic problem here is that having too many advantages can become a disadvantage when you're a young adult. We all know about former gifted kid syndrome. This is when a teenager who was good at school or sports fails to launch into adulthood because they were never prepared for the real world. And we know that this comes from a combination of outside pressure, internal perfectionism, and undiagnosed mental health issues. But that's psychology, and I'm an economist. So today I want to talk about the students who did everything right. The ones who got good grades and saved their pennies, but are still living lonely, broke, and in their mother's basements. Who then look at their friends, who were maybe more irresponsible than them, or who were less privileged than them, but were still able to achieve their dreams in spite of that. And how making smart decisions as a young adult might actually be setting you up for failure. It's a lot to go over, so please be sure to like this video and subscribe if you are new, and let's get into it. Now, the first smart decision a lot of young people make that could be sabotaging themselves is choosing a popular career. Go into computer science, they said. Teach kindergartners how to code, they said. Everyone will need this, they said. Okay, so no one could have seen AI coming, but the truth is that parents are constantly pushing their teenagers into career paths that could be oversaturated or hyper-competitive 10 years from now. And that pendulum is always swinging back and forth. One decade, college is the only way to achieve success. The next decade, it's a scam and everyone needs to go to trade school. And then the next decade, nobody can find an apprenticeship in a big city because everyone and their dog has a CTE license. It's a vicious cycle. Data science grew 650% since 2012, and now you can't throw a rock without hitting an article about how the industry is terrible, oversaturated, and not worth going into. Real estate was considered one of the most reliable pathways to entrepreneurship after the Great Recession, and now there are more people with realtor licenses in America than there actually are houses for sale. And you might be thinking, well, what the f***? How was I supposed to know what the market was gonna do when I was a 17-year-old? And, well, you weren't. You and your parents made a calculated bet on the market going in a certain direction, as opposed to just developing you into a competitive and adaptable young professional. And it is okay to work in an oversaturated industry, so long as you are skilled at and passionate about that industry. Because if there's only one job and you're competing against 20 other people who are more skilled and more passionate than you are, then you are screwed. And so the correct move for any young adult is to start pursuing what you're both skilled at and passionate about. And I can hear the objections already. But my passion is music, and every successful artist out there is some industry plant whose rich dad orchestrated their success from birth. True. But I'm not saying that you're going to become some international pop sensation because you're skilled at and passionate about music. What I am saying is that there are many, many, many good careers in the music industry that you could excel at because that's something that you're passionate about and skilled at. Very few people have jobs that kids dress up as for Halloween, but there are over 164,000 different jobs out there, 163,000 of which you've probably never heard of. There are career paths out there that leverage your skills and passions. And so your objective should be to get that career snowball going. Start majoring in something that interests you, find some relevant opportunities in that area, join some clubs, do some personal projects, and you're going to become increasingly aware of bigger and better opportunities that align with that passion and skill set. You know, it makes me really sad when I talk to college seniors and they tell me something like, yeah, I was really interested in environmental science at first, but then I decided to major in something with better prospects, only for them to find out way too late that there are many six-figure jobs in every city in America in environmental science. But no one ever told them that, and so instead of pursuing their actual interests, they went for something that they weren't as good at and weren't as passionate about so that they could play it safe. The second smart decision that sabotages a lot of young adults is when they outright avoid things like debt or expenses. Or put another way, when they don't make sacrifices to invest in their self, in their personal and professional development. You might think that living at home into your 20s and avoiding student debt like the plague is doing you some kind of long-term favor, but for many people it does the exact opposite of that, which was really hard for me to come to terms with as somebody who had to take out student loans, who had to move out when I was 18 in order to create a better life than the one that I grew up in. The idea that having no debt or that having a family that pays for everything could be a disadvantage was really hard for me to grapple with. But I've seen it play out now time and time again, because doing things like living on my own, going out of state, and taking out loans gave me something infinitely valuable that so many of my more financially privileged peers didn't have, and that was independence and motivation. Now, there's a fine line to walk here. I went to a very affordable state school, and I actively sought out scholarships through extracurriculars once I became a student, so I was still playing it very smart with money. But a lot of other people have this issue where having too many advantages actually becomes a disadvantage for them when they're a young adult. If daddy pays for school, then daddy gets a say in what you're studying. Kitten. If mom's basement is rent-free, then sure, you're saving money, but you're doing that at the expense of being able to have a romantic life or having a sense of autonomy and self-worth. And some people do navigate this well, but typically those are people from cultures where multi-generational households are the norm. And within those cultures, they have certain benchmarks and rites of passage so that the next generation can feel and act like adults, even if somebody else is paying for them to exist. America does not do that. We treat living at home in your 20s as an extension of your teenage years, and your parents continue to nag you about chores, they set a curfew about when you're going to come home at night, and so it's hard to be psychologically motivated when you have somebody else controlling your schedule and you live this very comfortable life, and so it really becomes death by complacency. The best way to gain independence and motivation is to do what makes sense for you, but in a way that is at least a little uncomfortable. Maybe your parents are paying for school, but you could still go out of state, or you could stay in state but live in the dorms instead of living at home, and then maybe you work 10, 20 hours a week to pay for your food or your rent. It doesn't have to be this epic tale of rugged self-reliance like what I went through. The important thing is just that you start to wean yourself off of the teenage status quo, taking on more financial burdens and more responsibilities slowly but surely so that you can become a contributing member of your family and society. Now, the next smart decision that a lot of young adults make that's secretly sabotaging them is focusing on school at the expense of everything else. Every summer, I give this lecture to the parents of college freshmen at orientation. Oh, by the way, I research and teach about the job market at a university. If you didn't know that, hello, but I digress. And I call this lecture the scare the shit out of them presentation, where I basically go through and explain that their kid won't be able to get a job as a senior if they focus on school and don't get any work experience. And I do this to get the point across that young adults are playing a different game now. Yes, they need to study, yes, they need to pass their classes, but they also need to learn how to pay their bills, make friends, get laid, start that career snowball with clubs, projects, and internships, and to land a full-time professional job in their target industry before they walk at graduation, because that's extremely hard, if not impossible to do once you no longer have access to your university's recruiting network. And if you don't do those things, and instead focus on getting straight A's, then all you're gonna graduate into is loneliness, underemployment, and a lack of self-confidence. It's not a joke. Life just has different rules when you turn 18 years old. Which isn't to say that you can't do those things and get straight A's. Plenty of people do it. But those A's aren't gonna get you a job 99.9% of the time. And they certainly aren't gonna give you a romantic partner or lifelong friends or stories that you can tell your kids down the road. And so the conclusion of this entire video is that you need to take risks. Every single one of those smart decisions that sabotage young adults have to do with risk aversion. You chose a popular career because that's what adults said you should do. You refused to go to college out of state because adults said you shouldn't take out debt. You keep living at home because your parents think it's stupid for you to pay rent when their basement is available. And you focus on school instead of life because you spent 12 years of compulsory education being told that academics was the pathway to success by adults. Well, those adults. And maintaining the status quo of your teenage years into your 20s instead of living up to your potential and designing a life that actually works for you. Your life is your own. So move out, major in something that interests you. You know, take on some debt, make some mistakes. Yes, it's gonna hurt in the moment, but you're gonna be so much better off down the road than if you hadn't made those mistakes and grown and learned from them. I will see you in the next video.